Welcome to Now in the 90s, where we look at the game releases of 30 years ago today. This week, another obscure Sega RPG, two-player chaos on the Genesis, and the best excuse for a movie tie-in game you could think of. Hi, I'm your host, Jared, and today is August 4th, 1993. It's one thing to have a movie tie-in game, but it's another for a game tied into the movie. Released in August 1993, was Surf Ninjas for the Sega Game Gear. Surf Ninjas is a side-scrolling action platformer. Play as the Surf Ninja Johnny and slowly walk through stages, jump around as needed, and get into fights with ninjas. Find items to use like shurikens, kunais, hearts for more health, or even actual Game Gears. Pause the game to check your stats and items, or have younger brother Adam activate his Game Gear to receive hints. Defeat bosses at the end of stages until the final battle with the evil dictator Chi trying to claim your inheritance. It's the early 90s. People everywhere were still riding the mega train of the media powerhouse that was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. After the massive success of their live-action movie and the follow-up, everyone was trying to get a piece of that pizza pie by making their own copycats and knockoffs. By the end of 1993, we had Ninja Turtles 1, 2, and 3, as well as the movie Three Ninjas. Surf Ninjas, the video game, is based on the movie Surf Ninjas from New Line Cinema, which released into theaters on August 20th, 1993. The game was released ahead of the movie, probably to help generate some hype for it. It was such a blatant attempt to capitalize on the popularity of the Ninja Turtles. In fact, the movie stars Ernie Reyes Jr., who was the stunt performer for Donatello in the first TMNT movie and played Kino in TMNT 2. It also stars Leslie Nielsen as the main villain Chi, and for some reason, Rob Schneider as, and I'm using this term loosely here, comedic relief.
Hey, sir! Whoa!
Who've just been given the power of the ninja.
It's your destiny.
Now, kill him, whether they like it or not.
Wow.
They're America's newest secret weapon.
There's dynamite here.
We'll throw it at him.
I got one!
Surf Ninjas.
I love the part when I was like,
Rated PG.
sorry.
The Surf Ninjas video game isn't just a quick cash grab attempt, it was integral to the development of the movie itself. The game was being developed while the movie was still in early production during the scripting stages. The director, Neil Israel, gave direct feedback to the game developers. Screenwriter Dan Gordon would develop action set pieces for the movie that he thought would work really well for a video game. New Line Cinema entered a partnership with Sega of America for development of the game and the movie. Sega partially financed the movie, but also had the stipulation that Sega products be prominently advertised, which is why in the movie, the younger brother character is always seen playing a Game Gear, and he eventually discovers that the Game Gear is magic and can somehow directly control the events of his immediate surroundings. If you've never seen the movie Surf Ninjas, it's really, really bad and as cheesy as it sounds. I highly recommend it. It was one of my favorites as a kid. Electronic Gaming Monthly's sister magazine, Sega Visions, had an interview with the producers of the Surf Ninjas movie and of the game, more direct marketing courtesy of Sega of America. Parts of the interview is basically a straight-up advertisement about why the Game Gear is better than the Game Boy. Bigger screen, clearer graphics, and in color. They stated that early playtests of the game were going well and getting some great feedback. In the 90s, this was called lying. The game is not good. Finicky controls, slow, clunky gameplay, you can't even see your current health without pausing, and it can be beaten in about 30 minutes. The only review we could find for it was from GamePro magazine, who liked the graphics, but also mentioned every single problem I just did. Surf Ninjas would only ever exist on the Game Gear, no other video game for any other console, never getting a port or re-release. There is a game called Surf Ninjas for the Amiga 94, but that has nothing to do with the movie and is just a reskin of a completely different beat 'em up. Overlooked at the time and now fondly remembered by some. Released this week in 1993 for the Sega Genesis was Sorcerer's Kingdom.
Sorcerer's Kingdom is a tactical RPG on the Genesis. Hopefully someone in the comments played this more because this segment is not meant for long RPGs.
Huh. Well, alright then. Just pretend we didn't cover this already.
Sorcerer's Kingdom is a turn-based tactical RPG. Move your character around the world and in dungeons. When battles begin, move party members around to attack or line up for magic spells. Enemies are visible on the overworld and can be avoided. Go to towns, talk to NPCs, purchase new equipment, and collect the spirits of the world to prevent evil from taking over. Sorcerer's Kingdom was developed by NCS Corporation. They're probably best known as the original developer of the Assault Suit Valken games and in Japan for the Landgrisser series. The first Landgrisser was released in America under the name Warsong. Sorcerer's Kingdom was their follow-up Western release. It's one of those RPGs that tries to not have experience points. Instead, the more you do something, the more that stat increases. Constantly attacking increases strength. Using more magic improves that, etc., etc. Then, you speak with the king for class promotions. It's also one of those games that is brutally difficult for no reason. It's so unfair that it's almost not worth even trying to play. Still, Sega needed RPGs. The Super Nintendo was already getting some bangers while they lacked a hit. Sorcerer's Kingdom still got some hype going into it. Electronic Gaming Monthly issue 46 previewed it, even going so far to say it features lots of detail, great music, and that it's a, quote, magnificent cartridge. Then it released. EGM gave a small blurb review with a respectable 7 out of 10. GamePro magazine's scores were all over the place. Their biggest sticking point was actually how bad the music was. Keeping the Sega train rolling is another favorite from the era. Released in August 1993 for the Sega Genesis, was General Chaos. General Chaos is a real-time strategy war game. Pick one of 4 squads of 5 to take on another squad of 5. You move a cursor around to aim your troops on the direction that they shoot and where they run to, or you can take direct control of some soldiers. Fight in jungles, hills, and city streets. If soldiers get close enough to enemies, they'll engage in fistfights, punch, block, and kick the enemy, but sometimes you can win the fight and the fallen soldier will still pull out a gun and take a cheap shot. General Chaos was published by Electronic Arts and developed by Game Refuge, the same development studio who created arch rivals for the NES and the creators of the series Rampage. Perhaps one of the most standout features was the multiplayer. You can play head-to-head with a second player, each controlling an army. You can also play 2-player co-op in the entire campaign, and it's one of the few Sega Genesis games that has full 4-player support using the Sega 4-way play for 2-on-2 team fights or 4-player co-op. Magazine advertisements for General Chaos also had the 4-way play advertised right on it, saying you can get one from mail order for only $29.95. And it's worth it. It's a very fun game that's fast-paced and is great either co-op or versus. These days, it's very much considered a cult classic. Reviews at the time were also favorable to it. Electronic Gaming Monthly awarded it an 8 out of 10, and GamePro magazine gave it solid 4s out of 5 in every category. It was such a cult classic, there's been an effort to bring it back. Original creator of the game, Brian Collin, launched a Kickstarter campaign in 2013 to revive the series with General Chaos 2: Sons of Chaos. That Kickstarter only got $15,000 of their $125,000 goal. On Brian Collin's personal YouTube channel, the last update they posted was in 2016 with a gameplay overview video. To bring things back to 2023 for a second, you may have seen an article going around recently about how 87% of all retro video games have not been preserved, archived, or ported, which is an astounding number, and you can't help but wonder, how could it possibly be that many? Well, to give you an idea, every single game we just covered on today's episode, Surf Ninjas, Sorcerer's Kingdom, and General Chaos, none of them have ever been re-released on any other platform. As for the General Chaos of all the other games released this week, here's Editor Dylan.
Streets of Rage 2 also graced the Game Gear this week, and we already covered the Genesis version near the end of '92, but it's still an awesome beat-em-up, only now it's on the go. For the first time ever, we have 0 Game Boy games, but a staggering 3 Game Gear games. Look out, Nintendo, because Sega's catching up with Formula 1, also on Genesis. Sure, it's a standard racer with grating engine noises, but what do you have coming up next week? Oh. Uh-oh. Wow, okay. Sega? Dude, I'm gonna be honest. You might need to cut your losses and just stick with the console releases. You'll see why next week. Let's change the subject. Hey, do you want to beat a game faster than this episode's runtime? Well, Thomas the Tank Engine and friends got you covered over on the Genesis. It's baby's first button push make noisy pictures move on the big square. No, I can't describe it better than that. Moving on. The last two games? Oh, sweet, they're for the Sega CD, which gives me the perfect reason to bust out my brand new Genesis Mini 2. The first one is Nobunaga's Ambition, where you get a history lesson right away. It's all very standard until
Firearms enabled Japanese craftsmen to build an 8-meter-tall humanoid robot powered by a steam engine.
Okay, cards on the table, I didn't read the title. Look, I was just excited to play something with actual Sega controls again. Can you blame me? The real title is called Robo Aleste, and it's actually a fun shoot 'em up with a great premise. Feudal Japan with mechs, robots, and airships, oh my. Great music, great gameplay, and the cutscenes aren't the stereotypical Sega CD FMV compressed into a Magic Eye poster type of thing. They actually look really good. The first game I tried on the Mini 2 was Night Trap, and I noped out of there in 2 minutes flat. Let's not forget the other CD release, which also happens to be a shoot 'em up, or shmup. Sylpheed comes out strong with the fully voiced 3D cutscenes at a buttery smooth frame rate. If the game looks half as good as this, I think it'll give Star Fox a run for its money. Well, I think it's safe to say, it does! It looks so good that I'm blown away by how well everything runs. It's not perfect. A lot of the effects are just glorified backgrounds, and most are actually distracting, making it hard to see projectiles. Maybe I'm just easily subjected to the honeymoon phase of a new console, but you can't tell me this isn't at least a little impressive for console gaming in '93. I don't know, I'm just happy to experience and appreciate new things that I didn't get to before. I wonder if you could mod this thing so I could play any upcoming Sega releases for the show. God, these mini consoles are awesome. The show is awesome. Video games are awesome. You're awesome. 10 games released on these 3 consoles this week in 1993. I'm glad I finally got to try out the Genesis Mini 2. I'm also glad Sorcerer's Kingdom got a second shot. Just pretend the April 14th pie chart shows a little less blue and I think it'll slide. But for real, thank you for commenting on these videos about the Genesis Mini. I am so freaking happy. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go peruse more of the games. Shining Force CDs on this thing? Fuck yeah!
Thank you, Dylan. Here in the Collector's Corner, Surf Ninjas released with a budget price of $34.99. Now, the game itself is only $10, but complete is a bit better at $68. Sorcerer's Kingdom, being an RPG, released with a price tag of $64.95. It's pretty uncommon, making a loose cartridge still worth $40, and one with the box and manual is worth $140. General Chaos is surprisingly easy to find. It released costing $49.95, and now finding the game on its own shouldn't run more than 17 bucks, and a complete in-box copy only goes up to $37. And that's it for today. Next week, a new SNK fighting franchise, a jetpack marsupial, and a long-running favorite Nintendo franchise achieves its dream on the Game Boy. I'm your host, Jared, and this was Now in the 90s. Thank you so much for watching Now in the 90s. I want to thank some patrons like Urban Skirk, Alkahest, and Alexander Williams. Please like the video and leave a comment down below, especially if you've played any of the games this week, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you already are a subscriber, thank you so much for watching this show every single Friday. I'm not kidding. As a kid, I loved Surf Ninjas. I was all about all those ninja movies. Any of the TMNT ones, I loved 3 Ninjas and 3 Ninjas Kickback, and yes, I loved Surf Ninjas. And honestly, I think the only reason why I liked it is because there was a Game Gear and that video games was on a movie screen at all. That just excited me as a kid. Wow, we were easily manipulated.